Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chattin with CHAP. I'm your host, Ginger Wade. And look, I have Will Estrada with me. He is our HSLDA lawyer, and we're very excited to have him with us today. But before we jump in with Will, I just want to remind you guys of a few things. In April, we have a Capital Day in Harrisburg. We're going to meet up there. Will is going to be there, actually, and we are going to talk about some of the stuff we're going to touch on today, but you also can go check out the Capitol. Did you know that Teddy Roosevelt dedicated our Capitol? There's some awesome history in our Capitol, lots of biblical stuff, actually. And so we encourage you to come. It is really, the tickets are really going fast. So if you want to get in there to have a guided tour of the Capitol, go get signed up soon. It's going to be a great day. So the other thing I wanted to make you guys all aware of is convention is coming up. It is June 12th through the 14th, and it will be Elizabethtown College again this year, and registration is open for that. So you definitely want to get out there, get your tickets. There's so much going on. Special needs again. We have a special writers track for people who are interested in learning how to write. We have the teen track by Unbound. We have graduation, which is back this year, and the UCS, which is back. So there's so much going on. Check it out, conv.chaponline.com. We would love to see you there. So, Will, not everybody who is listening probably knows who you are. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Ginger, I'd be delighted to. It's always good to work with you and the incredible team at CHAP. First thing to say about myself is I'm a Pennsylvania homeschool graduate. My mom and dad homeschooled myself and my seven younger siblings, so there were 8 of us up in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. Got the diploma, went to CHAP conventions many, many times. And today I'm thrilled to serve as HSLDA Senior Counsel, serving all of you in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. My wife and I live just south of the Maryland line, so a little south of the Mason-Dixon line. We homeschool our kids in Western Loudoun County, and so I'm up in Pennsylvania very often. It's easy driving distance, and I get to see so many of our good friends in Pennsylvania. So I came to Homeschool Legal Defense in January of 2004. I served for several years as a legal assistant to HSLDA attorney Scott Woodruff, who used to cover Pennsylvania as well. Of course, we've had numerous attorneys. We had Dee Black, who was there for many years, then Dan Beasley, then Scott Woodruff, and now myself. And I don't plan on giving up Pennsylvania for
Yay!
any time. So I'm going to be here for a while, hopefully. And then I was legal assistant for several years. Then I served as HSLDA's federal lobbyist on Capitol Hill for about a decade. And then in 2018, I went into the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I was in the Office for Civil Rights, did a lot of immunization issues, civil rights issues, privacy issues. So those will kind of come into play as we get into more of these discussions. Then realized being a cushy, highly paid federal bureaucrat was not really for me. I got bored. So after serving through the Trump administration and then some of the Biden administration, I left the federal government, came back to HSLDA, and I serve as senior counsel here and love having Pennsylvania as well as several other states for HSLDA.
And we are so thankful because we love having you. And but everyone has been wonderful, but I think it's so advantageous to have someone who's been here and lived through what we're living through, here in the state of Pennsylvania. So we really appreciate your support. And we're so glad you didn't get doged.
I might have been actually if I'd remained in the federal government. So I know numerous people who've been impacted by that.
Wow.
It's an interesting time in the DC area.
Yes, very interesting. Very interesting. So one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is a few months ago, and maybe some of you out there watching have received this email, and it was a statement about medical, like the medical dental immunization stuff that we get from the school, like it's coming out right now. Well, I've had numerous people contact me. My school wrote me this letter and they said I have to give them my medical information. It's the height and weight and all the stuff we have to do every year. My advice to the folks here in Pennsylvania is that you have your affidavit or your unsworn declaration, and on it, it says, I am taking care of my child's medical. I'm not in these words, but paraphrasing, I'm taking care of my child's dental and immunizations. And it's signed, and because that is proof, you signed it. and you hand it in. So that is a legal document saying, giving proof that you are taking care of your child. So, and then all the school districts write and say, well, we need the records, we need the actual records. And my advice to them is, if it's not a certified letter, you do not need to listen to that. And I know maybe you can enlighten me if anyone has actually sent a certified letter, but HSLDA recently came out with a statement on how they're going to be handling that with Pennsylvanians. I'm guessing, I don't know that this is happening in other states. But can you like brief us again on where you're at? Like what's HSLDA thinking about this particular part of the homeschool law?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of lay the background. Pennsylvania is an outlier on this issue as far as requests for immunization, medical, and dental documents and documentation for home educated students. There are a couple other states that do have this, but the trend has been to get rid of them. For example, Tennessee had a similar clause in their statute about immunization records, and that was deleted out of state code in 2023. So the background has been, and this all comes from the Home Education Statute, 24 Pennsylvania Statute, Section 13-1327.1, Paragraph B, Paragraph 1. This is the list where home educators in Pennsylvania are very familiar with what you have to send in every year by August 1st with your notarized affidavit, which was expanded to include an unsworn declaration in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I just want to read the last section. So it's all the information that will be in it. And then it says, quote, evidence that the child has been immunized in accordance with the provisions of Section 1303A and has received the health and medical services required for students of the child's age or grade level in Article 14, and that the home education program shall comply with the provisions of this section, and that the notarized affidavit or unsworn declaration shall be satisfactory evidence thereof. So this is a
Yes.
kind of run on sentence,
Yeah.
badly diagrammed paragraph. And of course, whenever you have a run on sentence, badly diagrammed sentence paragraph, that will raise problems, particularly when it's a legal document. So the Pennsylvania Department of Education has long said that the notarized affidavit or unsworn declaration is not satisfactory proof, that only applies to the last sentence. And for a long time of HSLDA's history, we didn't really kind of do battle on that section. There were a couple school districts in Pennsylvania that would really demand this information, and we generally did not engage on those issues. We gave families guidance, but we didn't really feel strongly that we would win if we litigated the issue. Then, really, things changed in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, as you remember, your former Secretary of Health went on to a high position in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the Biden administration. This is Dr. Levine.
Yeah.
And as a result, the majority of Pennsylvania's 500 school districts really began to put the screws on homeschoolers of give us your immunization, give us your medical, give us your dental records. And so what had been kind of a localized issue in some more aggressive school districts really became a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania issue. When I came onto HSLDA as senior counsel in the summer of 2023, I had just come off working at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We did a lot of work on civil rights, on religious, on medical exemptions for immunizations. This is an issue that I'm pretty passionate on as well. My wife is a huge supporter of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, of course, is now the new Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And so she feels very passionately as a homeschool mom on the immunization issue. So
Yes.
I began to dig into this, and working with our legal team and our litigation team here at HSLDA, we said, well, let's start to lay the legal groundwork. And so we began to push back on some of the overly aggressive districts. Numerous families received the certified letters signed by the superintendents. And we thought this was going to go to court. So we explained to families, there's never been a court case. We don't know how this is going to turn out, but we are going to litigate this on your behalf. And what we began to find out was the districts and even Pennsylvania Department of Education and the Pennsylvania Department of Health, they were sort of a paper tiger. And as we began to engage with the solicitors, for the school districts, we began to feel stronger and stronger that our legal position and CHAP's legal position is the correct legal position, that your notarized affidavit or
Mhm.
unsworn declaration is, in the
Is
words of
enough.
1327.1, satisfactory evidence thereof. And the thereof applies to the entire paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
not just the sentence immediately preceding that. So, for example, you don't give a copy of your high school diploma. You don't give a document showing what address you live at. For example, a copy of your driver's license or
Mm-hmm.
birth certificate, or your rental agreement or your mortgage agreement or your utility bill. All of that is you signing under penalty of perjury or in front of an affidavit, in front of a notary, that your affidavit is sufficient evidence thereof, or your unsworn declaration. And so we said, well, why would we treat the proof of immunization, medical and dental, differently? And I am pleased to tell you now, we have had school districts put in writing. They probably shouldn't have. As an attorney, I was shocked when I saw this, but I was happy. They put in writing that we, quote, we agree with HSLDA that your notarized affidavit or unsworn declaration is sufficient evidence thereof. Not a single family was hauled into court when
Excellent.
some of those families, particularly in Pocono Mountain and Pleasant Valley School District, received certified letters and we pushed back. The district never brought the family to a hearing. And so with that, and then coupled with recently it came to our attention that a central Pennsylvania school district mishandled student medical records. They
Yes.
had actually sent the wrong family's immunization records to another homeschool family.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the last straw. So we are
Mm-hmm.
now telling families, do not give your medical records. We don't even
Mm-hmm.
recommend give a copy of your a note from your pediatrician, although that's certainly an option.
Mm-hmm.
We are telling families just use the CHAP or use the
Exemption.
HSLDA notarized affidavit or unsworn declaration. If you decide to use some other organization's notarized affidavit or unsworn declaration, make sure the language regarding immunizations, medical and dental, is similar to the CHAP one or the HSLDA
Mm-hmm.
one, and then do not proactively give that information. And then if you are a member of HSLDA and you do receive additional requests for information, contact us. Basically, the Cliff Notes is we say ignore anything other than a certified letter signed by the superintendent. And if you do receive that, we'll go to battle on your behalf. But we have completely changed our guidance. Of course, families are free to provide the immunization information or medical and dental if they wish. I would recommend, because of how districts have mishandled this and how HIPAA and FERPA do not apply to these sort of records, I would recommend don't give your actual immunization records. If you want to give them more information, just get a note from your pediatrician, a note from your dentist, a note from your doctor. But our recommendation is don't give them anything. Give them the
Yeah.
notarized affidavit,
Yeah.
unsworn declaration. That is sufficient.
Okay, so that's interesting because that is what I had done a shows before about overreach, which is when the school asks for more than what they are allowed to, and over compliance, which is when a homeschooler offers freely more than what the law says. So you're saying now at this point, offering anything other than your affidavit and unsworn declaration is kind of like an over, it's over supplying you what you don't need to supply those things anymore. It's over. I just lost the word. Oh my word, my brain just totally
Over
left.
complying.
Over
Yeah.
compliance. Yeah. So that is actually so. Here's the thing, though, just to clear things, because there have been a number of people who have used our immunization exemption form. So, do you think that that is no longer necessary? Just use the affidavit and the unsworn declaration. So, like we used to, like with the immunizations being a separate thing, we used to say, okay, attach the immunization exemption that you signed that. I'm exempt from that, the religious philosophical exemption, and file that with your paperwork. For me, I've only done it once when my kids entered into homeschooling, and that was the only time. Some school districts want to see stuff like that every single year. So what do you think with that? Do you think that is not, you can just stick with the unsworn declaration or the affidavit and that's it?
So, Ginger, that's a great question. And you will remember, and I know the CHAP unsworn declaration affidavit says the same as the HSLDA one. It says, I say under penalty of perjury that
Yeah.
my children have the immunizations or have a religious
Religious
exemption.
exemption.
So, our position is
Okay.
that is sufficient. Now, we still do have a religious exemption form
Yeah.
on our webpage. I know there
Available.
are some families, we respect homeschool families. Some families are like, you know what? I respect HSLDA's position is on that, but I'm still going to attach my religious
Yeah.
exemption. And that is fine. As I tell my kids, it's a free country. If you do decide to send in a religious exemption, though, it is a one-time filing. So you did it absolutely correct, Ginger. Send it at the
Okay.
beginning of your homeschool program. If a
Mm-hmm.
district comes back and says, actually, we need it every year, let us know. We will write a letter on your behalf. This is
Okay.
so clear that it's a one-time filing that even Pennsylvania Department of Education says on their webpage, the religious exemption is a one-time filing.
One-time
So,
filing
so my opinion is that, and we defend families on this, is that you don't even need to give them your religious exemption. Your affidavit or unsworn
covers
declaration,
all of
if
that.
they include that, and
Okay.
that's why I say use the CHAP one
Mm-hmm.
or use the HSLDA one.
Yes.
I've not seen all the other ones, and a few organizations that I've seen, they don't have that. So you would need to attach a religious exemption. But
Okay.
if you use the HSLDA or the CHAP affidavit unsworn declaration, you're covered. If you want to include a religious exemption, then that's fine. Just as a one-time religious exemption.
Yeah.
They don't get to be like, oh, have your religious beliefs changed annually with the passing of the calendar? That's silly. Even
Yeah.
Pennsylvania Department of Education agrees with us on that. And we have sent numerous letters to school districts where they're saying, no, this is an annual filing. And I'm like, no, be happy they even gave it to you at all. I don't think they need to, but they
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
last year and they don't need to do it again.
Okay. Okay, well, that's excellent. So that clears the air even a little bit more. So we will talk about that again at the convention because Will always touches that on that. And some of us, we have a separate time on Thursday that we talk about it too. So you will be hearing that information again. But that is a load off. How about it, everybody?
Yeah, and I will talk about this in all the meetings. This, of course, is the biggest subject that we get here at HSLDA
Yes.
from our HSLDA members. But I will tell you, Ginger, since we've been aggressive on this issue, the number of school districts fighting on this issue has actually been declining. Now, of course,
Declining.
we'll see what happens. Actually, there's a few good headwinds we have as well. The federal government is really stopping this push for immunizations. Of course, I think we had been told that from bureaucrats, both in the federal government, who I used to work with, as well as in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, that this was all because of pressure they were receiving from the federal government. So
Yeah.
I think that's going away. I think this coming year, we're going to see even less number of school districts asking for this information with our aggressive pushing forward and the education you're doing at CHAP. I think we're going to really turn a page when
Yeah,
it
that's
comes to
awesome.
school districts being belligerent and aggressive
Yay.
for information that frankly they have no business asking for. This is
Exactly.
personal, sensitive
Hmm.
medical health information. HIPAA only applies to medical offices that are recipients of federal health and human services dollars. 99% of school districts across the nation, really the only way they would apply, HIPAA would apply, is if they had a health clinic in the school that was receiving federal HHS dollars. So this information is not protected. I think it's
Wow.
the height of arrogance for districts to ask for this information when it's not protected under HIPAA. This is between a family and their pediatrician, their
Doctor.
medical
Hmm.
provider. School
Hmm.
districts should not be asking for this. Honestly, it's an antiquated part of the code dating back to the
Hmm.
1940s
Hmm.
when there was this major push of measles, smallpox,
Yeah,
chickenpox,
yeah,
and all that sort of
yeah.
thing. We
Hmm.
don't really need that sort of thing anymore.
Hmm.
The schools are not the arbiter of health.
Yes. Time for some revisions, huh?
Well, long term, there are many changes I would like to do on this massive Pennsylvania code. I think I have a wish list, Ginger. I
Yes,
don't
me
think we
too.
have the votes in Harrisburg right now, but maybe one day.
We'll keep praying, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, so excellent. So let's move on to number two. So recently, I mean, we've all heard about the school choice thing and being able to, children to being able to choose where they go to school, funding for doing that. And it's a big, broad picture, and people need to be able to choose the education that is right for their kids. Totally believe in that. Um, we're so different. Homeschooling is so different than the public school and the charter school and the private school and the just so recently Senator Mastriano has talked about wanting to propose a bill with ESAs. ESAs is an education savings account. Okay. CHAP has a stance that we would not support an ESA bill because we do not want government funds. We do feel that there are ties with that. Like if the government gives us money, then they're going to want to regulate what we are doing. As in the example of the public schools, colleges that receive public federal funds and things like that. So tell us a little bit more about it, about what ESAs are, what HSLDA thinks about it. This is not, I just out there, everybody, I just want to make you aware that this is something that is being considered. It's not there right now, but I want us to be aware of some stuff that's going on out there. And school choice is a big thing right now. So let's talk about that a little bit. You can start jump into that pool wherever you want to.
Wow. You'd have to have been under a rock for the past 5 years if you've never heard of the word education savings account. It's basically been championed by almost every conservative organization, almost every Republican candidate. Even Governor Shapiro, as a Democrat, was very favorable about school choice. He never used the word education savings account, but he talked about school choice
School
when he was
choice.
running for
Yeah.
governor.
Mm-hmm.
Ron DeSantis has championed this in several
Mm-hmm.
states where I handle, in addition to Pennsylvania for homeschool legal defense, Wyoming, Tennessee, New Hampshire. Those are all states that have pretty much universal education savings accounts that homeschoolers are able to receive. It's it's a complicated issue, you said, Ginger. The most important thing, of course, is to make sure that homeschooling stays free and
Free.
safe.
Mm-hmm.
But we understand, particularly as homeschooling is growing, as costs rise, that there are families saying, well, why can't I get some of my tax dollars back when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to education
Mm-hmm.
savings accounts? I'm going to
Absolutely.
recommend that people, as they're considering this, read two resources. This was written by the
Yes.
president of
Mm-hmm.
HSLDA. It's called The Civic Virtue of Private Home Education, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Oppose So-Called Education Savings Accounts for Homeschoolers. Of course, a reference there from Jim Mason to the famous movie Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. But you could just Google The Civic Virtue of Private Home Education by Jim Mason, and it'll be the top thing. It's about 7,000 words, but he kind of goes through philosophically his position and HSLDA's position when it comes to education savings accounts. Then, if you want more of a quick and infographic version, so this is the if you've got the ADD version, the Will Estrada version on ESAs, this is something that our team at HSLDA put together. It's called Spillin' the Tea on ESAs. You can just Google Spillin' as in, apostrophe S.
Chatting, right?
Chatting,
Chatting
chatting
with
with Chap,
Chap. It's the
spilling
same
the tea
thing.
on
Your apostrophe.
ESAs. And we kind of go through the information there. Obviously, for pro ESA side, I know Commonwealth Fund or Commonwealth Foundation in Pennsylvania. They're a center right think tank. They've been championing them. Doug Mastriano is a friend of homeschooling. So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
information out there. Encourage people to dig into it and do their research on it. Frankly, I don't think ESAs are going to make it to the governor's desk anytime soon. Even in kind of red-leaning states, there's been challenges because school districts are such big employers, and the teachers' unions have
Yeah.
been against ESAs.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close. I wouldn't say Republicans have a veto-proof majority in the House and Senate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and then even though Governor Shapiro talked about school choice on the campaign trail,
It's
he's
not.
he's cut back on some of
Yeah.
those programs for low
Uh-huh.
income private school families, and a lot of the school choice people are very upset about that. So
Mhm.
I think you're right, Ginger, that this is coming down the road. I don't think we're going to see it in the next couple of years, though, in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. But hey, I've been wrong before, so encourage people to do their research and really start
Yeah.
thinking about this issue.
Yeah, I think it is important to consider, and I know with us when CHAP post COVID, you had all the COVID schoolers, and some people wanted to stick around and are like, well, why don't I get money for this? I'm a taxpayer and all this, and I get that. Like I really get that. And we've done a lot of thinking and research and what happens with, with anything, not just education, but what happens when the government gives you money, what happens to the organization. So just think about that, how the government um affects the things that it donates to, right?
Let me tell
Uh
you a story about that, Ginger. So,
yeah.
when I spent over a decade being HSLDA's federal lobbyist, I was with many of the private school organizations in Washington, D.C. And it was very interesting seeing what happened with the Roman Catholic private schools, and the
Hmm.
sisters and the nuns would talk about this. And their biggest issue, because they were recipients of federal funds and government funds, was that, and this started in the Obama administration, they were told, oh, because you take these federal funds, Title I dollars for reduced school lunch, IDEA funds, you have to remove all the crucifixes from your Catholic schools.
Catholic school.
And I mean, they
Oh my
were
goodness.
furious, but that was the guidance that the Obama administration, then it was continued through the Biden administration, did. And so
Wow.
it's very sobering. The private school organizations, they received the funds for their traditional brick and mortar private schools, and then it didn't happen overnight. But then decades later, administrations would put restrictions on what the schools had to do. And these Catholic schools had a very hard decision. They said, do we give up the funds, or do we give up what is so important to us as Roman
Yeah.
Catholics and Roman Catholic educators? And many of them were unable to give up the funds because they had become so dependent on those
Yeah.
dollars. And
That's
I talked to
that's the
Roman
yeah.
Catholic sisters that they said we had to take down our crucifixes, and it broke their hearts. And
Mm,
so it's a sobering reminder that this might not happen overnight, but with government money can come government strings as well.
yes. Yeah, it's very tantalizing. And I think and that's the thing. Like it's becoming dependent. Like at first, oh no, it's fine and you can do whatever, but then, as you become dependent on it and you think, oh, I can't possibly homeschool without this extra money or without federal support, then you're willing to give up those things that are so, foundational like that. I mean, wow, that's a big thing for the that just blows me away that you just become so dependent upon that you can't walk away from it. So, and there's other options, maybe tax credits instead of actual money from the government. So there's different options, but we just wanted to make you guys aware out there that these types of things are going on. Hopefully you are aware of school choice. The school choice typically does pretty much mean the education savings accounts, right? Well, I mean,
Yeah,
at first
school
I felt
choice
like,
is a broad term. I consider homeschooling even a type of school choice because it's a
yeah,
choice for education.
that's what
Um,
I felt, but I felt like when I was hearing other discussions about it, it's kind of like just a moniker and it really means education savings accounts. Is that kind of
yeah, it's the
going
problem
on or
is it's one of those things everyone has different views of what their definition
definitions?
is. It's like I did
Yes.
high school debate when I was being homeschooled, and he who wins the definitions wins. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's like parental rights, for example. It's such a
Yeah.
broad term. Homeschooling falls under parental rights, but it
Yeah.
kind of means different things to different people. So I always encourage
Yeah.
people dig into it. And if
Yes.
if Senator Mastriano would be willing to consider a tax credit. I always think tax credits or tax deductions are better than actual vouchers or cash from the government,
Yes.
because there's much more of a body of case law that if you're getting a tax credit or a tax deduction, then the Department of Revenue or the IRS can come in and ask for receipts, but that's about limited to it, and that only happens in an audit. So it
Yeah.
I think tax credits and tax deductions are preferable to ESAs or vouchers because there's far less way for the government to put strings in there. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's generally, unless it's a refundable tax credit, it's generally you keeping more of your money
Your
and
money.
not giving it to the
Get
treasury, and then the treasury
exactly.
giving it back to you with their kind of grubby hands attached to it.
Exactly. Exactly. I
What's that
keep
old
telling my
Beatles
kids,
song about a tax man? If you try to walk, I'll tax the streets. So
well, I keep telling the kids, like we keep talking about this, does the government have a job? Like, no, it's taking our money and it's using our money. It's not earning money because it's going to work. Like the government is not going to work to earn money. They're taking our money that we went to work for to earn.
I mean,
So
that gets into just almost a philosophical
yeah,
discussion of what
yeah,
is the purpose of the government. And our
yeah,
founders, when they
yeah,
wrote the US Constitution in 1787, it was pretty limited. It was post offices, interstate highways and roads, and national defense and patent office, and
yeah,
courts.
yeah,
So pretty limited,
yeah,
coin money. But a
yeah,
lot of the things that we've seen today, even public schools were not
yeah,
a role of the federal government. It's not in the US
yeah.
Constitution.
Yeah. Well, and even the DOE only started when Jimmy Carter was in office. So, that's
Yeah,
like
so the
new
US Department of
stuff.
Education used to be an office within the US Department of Health and Human Services. It was
Wow.
called the Health, Education, and Welfare Department. When I worked in HHS, and this was 2018 is when I first went into the US Department of Health and Human Services. We still had old documents from pre
Wow.
1979 that called it HUE, Health, Education, and
Wow.
Welfare.
Hmm.
And before US Department of Education became its own cabinet level
Yeah.
federal department.
Wow. Things to think about. Things to think about, everybody. Be out there processing. Wow. Okay. So we gave them that a little bit to chew on. So now let's touch on the big thing that's going on, that it's actually going on right now in various states. That's just fundamental to the freedom to homeschool and what's going on. I mean, the acronym Make Homeschool Safe again, MHSA. Sorry, I closed my eyes so I can think. Um, so what is this? What are we seeing? Like, where is it coming from? I know you're involved. You're intricately involved with what is going on here, and just make our audience aware of the need to be ready to defend the freedom to homeschool. Um, Things are pretty going pretty fine in Pennsylvania right now, but our neighbors are having some challenges and we need to be aware of them. So,
I was looking to see if I had my copy of the latest court report because if you are a member of HSLDA and you get our court report, then we did an article about the Make Homeschool Safe Act, MHSA, and the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, CRHE. And so at the outset, Ginger, I'd encourage people, you can just Google Make Homeschool Safe Act, Coalition for Responsible Home Education, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, those three terms, even just the acronyms, and the first hit will pop up our story. We have an article, two articles now on our webpage. One is in the court report, and one is on our webpage, talking about this really grave threat to homeschool freedom. And so let me back up. Um, Homeschooling was illegal in many states in the
yeah.
late 1970s, early 1980s. Of course, historically, that's how most children were educated in our country. You had one-room schoolhouses, and then you had boarding school for elite students. But then most people were homeschooled. Abraham Lincoln was homeschooled, a lot of our founders. As we had industrialization in the early 1900s, that's when you saw the rise of compulsory education statutes. And so most kids went into public school. But as our country grew, as kind of social issues and hot button political issues became a fight in the 60s, 70s, parents began to look back at homeschooling again. And so you had the rise of homeschoolers, and it was kind of two people, the traditional Christian conservatives, and then the crunchy, hippies who were homeschooling in the 70s and 80s. But homeschooling really began to take off, and homeschoolers were still being thrown in prison as late as 1996. But by 1997, all 50 states had legalized homeschooling. Homeschooling was free and legal. And since that time, we've seen a trend of state after state reducing red tape, providing more freedom. Even in Pennsylvania, while we haven't really seen as much of the red tape, well, there were some major amendments in 2014,
Hmm.
but we've seen improvements like homeschoolers in Pennsylvania being able to do career and technical education and sports access and extracurriculars, even some co-curriculars in the public school. Pennsylvania, for all of the red tape we have in the homeschool law, we also have a lot of options for homeschoolers
Yeah.
to participate that's pretty unique among the 50 states. And things were going well. And then in 2013, an organization was founded called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. The name sounds great, like, oh, we like homeschooling, should be responsible. But these are very ideologically driven, pro authoritarian, pro government control people. And they are saying, we didn't like our homeschool education. We really want to roll back homeschool freedom. They didn't really do much, but then starting in the past couple years, they really began to get very supportive articles in major mainstream write-ups. Washington Post last year had a big six-part expose on homeschooling. Coalition for Responsible Home Education was behind that. Last year, ProPublica did a big story in Illinois about lax regulations and homeschooling leads to child abuse and child neglect. And that's really been the main argument that Coalition for Responsible Home Education has made. Without evidence, they've asserted that homeschooling causes children to be abused and neglected. And their solution is the Make Homeschool Safe Act. It's a 24-page model bill. It's basically a monstrosity. It would roll back homeschool freedom to where it was back in the early 1980s, what we fought against to allow people to be able to homeschool. And this is a model bill. It's not been introduced in any state, but it's been parts of it have been introduced in two states now. The first one was in Virginia. Some of our listeners might be familiar with the battle for SB 1031. This was a bill that was introduced to eliminate the religious exemption option, which is one of two main ways that people homeschool here in Virginia. That's actually how my wife and I homeschool. Because of our faith, we did a religious exemption. This is something that Jews, Muslims, Christians, Wiccans, Baha'i, I mean, pretty much anyone of faith, if they're homeschooling their children because of that, they can do a religious exemption. It would have eliminated that option. We worked closely with our friends at Home Education Association in Virginia. Basically, the entire homeschool community came together, and the bill was defeated in committee 13-2. It was a bipartisan bill. We were all greatly relieved. I called
Yes.
my senator, my delegate. My wife did. Thousands of homeschoolers called out and made the trip to Richmond. But the interesting thing was Coalition for Responsible Home Education was there in Richmond, testifying and lobbying in support for this. So after their bill went down to defeat in Virginia, they said, all right, we need a more sympathetic climate. So they introduced a bill in Illinois. In Illinois, that's one of the states that I handle for HSLDA, and we have our backs to the wall right now. I'm flying out tomorrow to testify against this bill. It's HB 2827. You've probably seen our social media on HSLDA because this is one of the greatest threats to homeschool freedom we've seen in Illinois, in almost basically in the history of homeschooling in Illinois. It would roll back the clock. It would actually criminalize the failure to file paperwork. As our listeners in Pennsylvania know, if you don't file your affidavit or unsworn declaration, there's kind of a range of things that happen. You'll get reminders from the school district. Then eventually you'll get a certified letter from the superintendent. If you don't answer that, then it goes before a hearing, before a neutral hearing officer. And if you lose, you could lose the right to homeschool for 12 months, which is a really grave threat. This bill in Illinois is worse. It goes, you have 10 days to file your paperwork. If you don't, you're convicted of truancy. It actually says in the bill you are then your children are truant, and the penalties for truancy immediately apply. What are the penalties for truancy? Well, in most states, including Illinois, it's a Class C misdemeanor. That's a criminal offense. You can be fined up to $500, have up to 30 days in jail, a criminal conviction on your record. And of course, whenever there's a criminal conviction, Child Protective Services gets involved. Children can be removed and temporarily placed in foster care. There is not a single state in the nation that treats a failure to file homeschool paperwork as a criminal conviction. Illinois would become the first one right off the bat if that were to happen. So honestly, if HB 2827 passes, Illinois might be worse than New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, which are some of the most strict states to homeschool. So, Coalition for Responsible Home Education has registered as a lobbyist. A lot of the provisions that are in Make Homeschool Safe Act are in HB 2827, and we've got our work cut out for us to fight this bill. We're working closely with our friends in the Illinois homeschool community. If it passes in Illinois, or if it had passed in Virginia, we would see a domino effect of states trying to introduce this. So
Yeah.
The good news is we have not seen any bad bills introduced this session in Pennsylvania. There are kind of other states where they're running as a test case. But Ginger, I think this illustrates two things. First, the importance of what you do at CHAP. The local state homeschool associations are absolutely incredible. So if you are not a member of CHAP, I encourage you to join CHAP. And then it illustrates also the importance of this Capital Day that we have, where I'll be speaking in April in Harrisburg. Sign up for the CHAP Capital Day. The best thing we can do to protect against Make Homeschool Safe Act or some other bad bill being introduced in Harrisburg is build relationships with our elected officials proactively before a bad bill is introduced. So when the lobbyists for Coalition for Responsible Home Education come, and when they say all these homeschoolers are parental rights extremists, that's their term that they use, and they are just hiding behind these homeschool laws to abuse and neglect their kids, the legislator will say, wait a minute, I know Ginger Wade. She's not a parental rights extremist. She loves her kids. We want them to think of homeschoolers, think of people like you, people like Ginger, who love their kids, who sacrifice for their kids, rather than this kind of bogeyman that CRHE has said homeschoolers are. And that will only happen if you go sign up for your Capital Day with CHAP and come out, have their smiling, friendly face, your kids there, and you get to see our legislators get to see you as a homeschooler and kind of make that association of, oh, I like homeschoolers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly like with all these things. So many times on here on my show, I'm talking about relationships, everything's relationship. Well, guess what? Legislation and being connected with your government is the same thing. It's all about my mouth today. Relationships, because they're people. They're just people. Like I know my representative is Tom Jones. He's great. I've been in his office a number of times. We've had conversations. He's come to our co-op and done talks and everything. And he loves talking and he loves, teaching and stuff like that. He's just a guy and he wants to know people and he wants to be connected with people. And it's not like there are these, I think we have this thought of our legislators and stuff being like these, we can't touch that. They're so far out there. And, although they're supposed to represent us, right? But somehow in our minds, we have this separation there of connection, and they're supposed to be connected to us. We're supposed to know them personally. They're supposed to know who we are. They're supposed to talk to the people that they represent. So it's important for us to get out there, write letters. Yeah, come to Capital Day, but write letters. When they're not in session, go to their office. I've been right down here in E-Town. I've been to Tom Jones's office a number of times. If you have a really homeschool friendly representative or a senator, they might have events in their offices. Tom does. There's a bunch of them now that are doing more things like that to reach out and be connected to their constituents and stuff like that. So that I was going to ask you that question, but you jumped right into it for me. It's like, guys out there, you need to be active and connected and be making those personal relationships. So when they think homeschooler, they think, oh, well, those guys I don't want to do anything that's going to be a detriment to them. That relationship
exactly.
is
Hey,
a big,
and
huge thing.
Capital Day with CHAP in Harrisburg too is great for your portfolio. You'll get a picture with your legislator, and a picture of your kids there walking the halls. It's a beautiful Capitol. It's civics. You check that day off as another day for your 180 day in your log. And it's an easy day too. You're fun. Not having to wrestle with math concepts or diagramming a paragraph. Although I think our legislators could benefit from that, as we talked about today.
Yeah, that run-on sentence was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Capitol is gorgeous. And like, if you love music, man, that rotunda, go in there and sing a few bars because it is amazing. I did go to public school. My alma mater was there, one of their singing groups, and they sang the national anthem in the rotunda. And it was
Maybe we should do that, Ginger.
Maybe we should. I don't know. I have to think about that. How my kids
or America the Beautiful. It's a little easier.
America the Beautiful would be wonderful too. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous place. Lots of scripture all throughout that building, believe it or not. It's amazing. And there's tours that you can get actually that talk about all these things. So, Will, thank you so much for coming today. You did mention becoming a member of CHAP. So HSLDA has a membership, which I advise you guys do that too, because if you come up with issues, then you can call Will and say, hey, I need some help, and he'll be right on it. And there's like he copies me on all the letters. There have been a lot of letters, which is really, really great because it's helping to educate the school districts because they don't necessarily know. It's another thing to remind you guys of. Your school district does not necessarily know the homeschool law. They know the public school law. They know the rules for public school students, but they don't necessarily know what's going on with even your homeschool liaison person doesn't necessarily know what's going on with the homeschool law. So it's important to know it. If you come to the convention or any of our in-person events, we have homeschool law booklets that has just the text of the law in there with all the updates, like you were talking about CTC and stuff like that. All the updates are in there so you can have the booklet. And if they ask you for something, you can say, show me in this booklet where it says that I'm supposed to give this thing to you. And if they can't show you, then, so that's how with the overcompliance and the things like that, you can set them straight. You can say you can't ask me this thing. So grab one of those law booklets at our next live event. As far as being a member of CHAP, when you sign up for our email e-news, our email newsletter, which is on chaponline.com under contact, you can subscribe to the e-news. You are a member of CHAP, and the way you support CHAP, being a member, is supporting what we are doing. How do you do that? Time, talents, treasure. Okay, God has given you all of these things, and you need to seek him out for how you are to use the things that he's given you. Maybe you have a talent, a gift, and some time where you can donate to help us with an event, help us with a convention, help us with some background stuff like editing podcasts or answering phone calls, anything like that. You want to be a mentor or treasure, you can donate to what we're doing so we can continue to do these things, continue to have these events where we gather you together, give you the information you need so that you can stand strong, get you involved. Legislative team, we're building the legislative team. We would love to have legislatively minded people reach out to us, staff at chaponline.com, and let us know. We're building up that team. We're going to, help guide the rest of homeschoolers in the state of Pennsylvania. What do I say to my legislators? When's the good time to go? What should I talk to them about? That's the type of stuff that the legislative team is going to do, and maybe even think about some legislative changes. Who knows? So, so reach out to us. We want you to be involved. The more we have to build our CHAP community, the better it's going to be for homeschoolers in Pennsylvania. So anything else you want to share, Will, before we sign off for the day?
Ginger, I love working with you and your team at CHAP. You are engaged. You guys know Pennsylvania in and out and the legislators. So it's just a privilege to serve CHAP and the Pennsylvania homeschool community.
Thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate that you came on today. And just getting the bug in the ear, people thinking about these things and being ready. So it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing you in maybe about a month, a little
it's
less
like
than
3
weeks,
I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
4
It'll
weeks.
be fun. It'll be fun. It'll be great. And everybody else, I will see you back here. Actually, next week it'll be Ro, but then the week after that, I will see you again. And stay tuned because Ro is going to be doing a lot of great interviews in relation to the convention. So if you want to know stuff about convention, stay tuned to that. And I'm going to still come on here. We're going to be giving you really good advice about homeschooling, tips, tricks, all those types of things. So stay tuned. Like, subscribe, share the stuff, make everybody aware that these resources are out there because we are here for you. And as always, continue to love walking with Jesus, with your children, teaching them to follow Christ in all of life. And we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye.